Hercules once said, "A true hero isn't measured by the size of his strength, but by the size of his heart." Hopefully, once you heard this quote, one specific person comes to mind. It could be your mom, your dad, or someone else you truly care about. When I first read this quote, I 100% thought about one specific person, and that one specific person was my grandma. That's why today I'll be talking to you guys about how my grandma has left an impact on my life so far. How she taught me how to weed, how to cook, and spending time with her has taught me how to be there for someone. It seemed like every weekend I was at my grandparents' house because my parents were working to provide for me and my siblings, and that made our bond that much closer. And it was almost like every time I was over there, she was in the kitchen cooking, and that was one thing she loved doing and would gladly teach me. The first thing we made together was meatloaf. I don't know how many of you had made meatloaf before, but the feeling of mixing all the raw meat, the seasoning, the cold, it's a pretty unsettling feeling. And I also like to brag to my siblings that I'm the best cook out of all three of us, and that's all in thanks to my grandma. And this is like a tradition, but it seems like every Friday, my grandma's always texting us, "What do you guys want for dinner this Friday?" And we always go out there, she cooks a meal, and we always have a nice family dinner. And this is like a funny thing, but it seems like 2 times a week, she always just drops food off because she makes way too much food for my grandpa and her. And after all 5 of us are done eating, there's still leftovers. That just shows you how much she likes cooking and how much food she makes. Another lesson she taught me when I was over at her house was how to weed in the garden. It's one of those things you don't realize how time-consuming and tedious it is until you actually do it. I have to admit, I hated doing it when I was younger. But now that I'm older, I realize that taking your time makes the finished project, look that much better. And I understand. Next, I'm going to talk about how my grandma is always there when I need her the most. So, for example, whenever I'm struggling in English class or struggling writing an essay, I always go to her, and she always gives me good advice on what to fix. I don't know how many of your grandparents have Snapchat, but mine does. So before every game, she always texts me. It's always the same thing every time, but I always look forward to it. It usually goes, "It's a beautiful day for Elmo basketball or football. Depends on what season I'm in. Go give it your all out there. I'll be rooting for you in spirit." Whenever I look in the stands and I don't see her, that text really makes me feel like she's really rooting for me in spirit. I also feel like I play 10 times better when I get one of those texts. I think it's just a mental thing, but hey, it's the little things. And she's always positive. That's one thing I admire about her. For example, my grandpa is in a wheelchair and can't do anything on his own. I know it's tough on her having to care for herself, cook, and do chores. But she's always positive, and she taught me how to be positive. This football season, I kind of fell out of the love for the sport. And that's something I've been playing since basically preschool. So I went over to her house one day. She's like, "I can't wait to watch your football games." And that made me fall back in love and made me want to fall back in love with the sport and do what I've done my entire life, basically. And she always looks for the good in people. That's another thing I admire about her. Whenever we meet new people, she's like, "Never judge a book by its cover. You never know what they could be going through." And that's another thing I really, truly admire about her. Today I talked about how my grandma has left an impact on my life. I gave examples how she taught me life lessons I can use throughout my life, how she is always there for me, and the value of hard work. I am very thankful for all of these life lessons she taught me, for all the time we spent together, and when you hear the quote I started out with, "A true hero isn't measured by the size of his strength, but by the strength of his heart." What person truly lives up to that for you? For me, that person was my grandma, and now I hope you all can see why.